Hey everyone, it's Movie Lover 120 here, and I'm here with episode 5 of my Halloween horror movie reviews, and this review is going to be for none other than a film that came out in 1973, one of the most iconic horror films for horror fans, one of the most well talked about horror movies ever, the most famous, and just was considered one of the greatest movies of all time in cinema, and a film that changed the game in horror, introduced practical effects to the genre, and that is none other than William Peter Blady's The Exorcist, directed by William Friedkin. Yes, I own the extended director's cut, guys. This is my copy of the movie. Yeah. This movie. Now, this film was released in 1973, and of course, was a massive hit at the box office. It made so much money, and today is considered one of the highest grossing horror movies ever, with $441 million worldwide, earned through several re-releases, and is loved by loads of horror fans, considered one of the scariest movies ever made, especially from directors Martin Scorsese, and upon many other filmmakers. The film later became so iconic, is one of the most notoriously talked about horror movies anywhere you go. Like, whenever you hear someone say they love horror movies, or say, think of the scariest movies they see, they always say this. The Exorcist is always among them. What are my thoughts? Well, it's a good movie. It's good as a movie. It's a decent horror film, but I find it slightly overhyped. Okay, I'm going to get hate for saying that, because I know people are going to get mad at me for saying that. But my opinion, I think it's a bit overhyped. I mean, I understand it made a big impact. It's still one of the best movies I've ever seen in my life. It's still a phenomenal film. I just don't think it's that scary. I mean, I've seen some scarier films, like The Shining and The Omen. I find a little bit scarier than this, personally. But this is still a classic movie. And I can agree why, and I can see why it made such a massive impact. Like, when it was when it was released in theaters, it made a lot of people sick. They threw up. It was something they had never seen before. Just, yeah, this was something most horror fans were introduced to horror films like Psycho, where The Thing from Outer Space, more like vintage or stuff. Like, this was the first time anyone saw any practical effects in a horror movie. Yeah. And because it made so much money, it spawned several shitty follow-ups. It spawned a shitty sequel known as Exorcist II: The Heretic, which is an absolute shitfest, and that's all I'll say about it. Like, me and Hellhound absolutely despise that movie. We never like talking about that movie, and like he said, less said about that movie, the better. Exorcist 3 is a decent sequel. It's still better than The Heretic, but it's kind of more the proper Exorcist 2. It's kind of the true sequel that was written. I just think that one's okay, but it's still better than The Heretic. And Exorcist the Beginning, a Dominion prequel to The Exorcist, are both really the same movie, except one's just the true vision, but they're both shit either way. But yeah. Other than that, this movie should have really just been a standalone movie. And you want to know what's worse? Blumhouse is going to be making a direct sequel to this movie. Yeah, they're doing the same thing they did with Halloween 2018 and Candyman 2021. To be fair, it only worked with those two movies because Halloween, like you know, had some good sequels, but had a lot of really bad sequels that ruined the first one. And Candyman had no good sequels and hardly had any mention of the first one, so those were probably the only times this worked. I mean, a lot of horror films are doing this now, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is getting a shitty Netflix direct sequel, but let's just talk about The Exorcist, what we really came here to do. Anyway, the plot of this movie: a visiting actress in Washington, D.C. notices dramatic and dangerous changes in the behavior and physical makeup of her 12-year-old daughter. Meanwhile, an priest at nearby Georgetown University begins to doubt his faith while dealing with his mother's terminal sickness. And, look getting the story, a frail elderly priest recognizes the necessity for a showdown with an old demonic enemy. Yeah, that's the plot of the film. This is pretty much, like I said, this is a classic, considered to be a classic and iconically talked about film among horror fans. I mean, I don't think it's that scary, but I do agree it has a clever, well-planned plot and a solid direction from William Friedkin, and Friedkin builds the tension masterfully, incredible suspense and a very sinister and eerie feeling, some great shock value too. The result is a pretty good movie. Not a necessarily scary one like some people say, but there's still some scary moments here and there I do agree are generally terrifying. And one which reminds you that horror movies don't have to be B-grade school, and they can be also kind of works of art. Like, this movie has such great acting, especially from actors like Ellen Burstyn, well, Max von Sydow, Lee J. Cobb, Jason Miller, Jack McGraw, Kitty Wynn, and let's not forget Linda Blair, who gives a very great performance as Regan, who's one of the most terrifying, who's probably one of the most terrifying villains. I mean, possessed Regan, anyways, not normal Regan. Possessed Regan is considered to be one of the most terrifying villains in horror history. Like, there's still some extremely scary, terrifying moments, especially Regan's iconic head scene, like you've seen in the intro. There's some fantastic writing, and well, this movie doesn't really scare me that much. There's one thing that really does freak me out. Like, Regan's possessed look is extremely terrifying. Like every time I see pictures of her face, like all those pictures of her possessed face are extremely terrifying to look at, especially knowing I have to see them almost everywhere I go if I'm a horror fan. Like, specifically like the Maze game. Specifically, her face is so terrifying that it became a big photo for all those scary Maze games all over the internet. Like you've seen in those videos, like, man, yeah, her pictures of her are extremely, seriously, I can't even get through any pictures of Regan. They just freak me out. Like, her face always freaks me out whenever I see it. But just, what shows that there's great makeup. Like, the makeup artists were really done well. And there's an awesome direction from William Friedkin. The film has been known to scare people more than any other horror movie, which, to be fair, I think The Shining's way scarier than this movie. I like The Shining better. It has inspired horror films to make about demonic possession and exorcisms too. Like, yeah, it's became like this big cultural phenomenon, parodied, referenced in many other different films, and it's also somewhat of a provocation about the nature of God, good and evil. The film's quite suspenseful moments keep on the edge, and yeah, so there's still some good things. The bad qualities, like, personally, like I've said many times already, the movie isn't really that scary at all as you get older anyways, but I can see why it was scary when it obviously pretty scary for people when it first came out. I mean, so I'm left with although it does at times leave me with a slight discomfort in my stomach every now and then. To me, it didn't really feel like it made the hair on my back rise up. I was really surprised by the beautiful imagery that was shot in Iraq with the excavation at the beginning. I do wish it could have been a little more clear how the excavation of the little figurine that presents fighting evil with evil at the beginning relates to the young girl. How did it get to settle? This evil spirit dug up from its tomb in a house in the same city the priest returned to. And plus, when did he return? Was he like writing kind of a book elsewhere? And I didn't even see correctly that the little figurine dug up in Iraq was later found outside of the house. And if the priest wasn't elsewhere writing a book, why did he pass by the house? How did the little figurine even end up in the house? Those were some kind of confusing plot holes, but I still kept getting interested in the movie. But with a subject like the priest taking 10 minutes without a solid hook into the horror genre beginning, like the beginning did feel a little bit slow also. There was some slow pacing. Yeah, there's a bit of slow pacing in this movie. It does feel a little bit too long at times. I wish it kind of been a little bit shorter, but then again, it is kind of based off a book by William Peter Blatty. So I can see why it's a little bit long, and get this was actually also one of the few horror films that was nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards. This was like all the way back when the Academy Awards actually meant something. Like, I think this was only horror film to be nominated for so many awards at the Oscars. I mean, I don't really pay attention to the Oscars, guys. The Oscars are kind of a joke, but back then the Oscars actually did mean something. So yeah, I forget which awards it won, but I think it won quite a few awards, and yeah, so despite some bad qualities, if you are a horror fan, I guess you should check this out because it is one of the most iconic horror movies of our generation. Most iconically talked about horror films for a lot of horror movie fans. However, as for the sequels, here's what I'll say if you really do want to check out the other films. For starters, with Exorcist II: The Heretic, skip that damn movie like the plague, it sucks ass. Exorcist 3 is actually worth checking out, and probably the only sequel that's really worth checking out, really. I mean, still not as good as the first one, but it's actually more, but it's more of the proper sequel to Exorcist that really should be said. And Exorcist: The Beginning and Dominion prequel to Exorcist, skip both of those, because they also suck. So yeah, I'd only watch this movie, and I only watched Exorcist 3. The only Exorcist 3 is the only sequel that's actually worth watching. So yeah. So yeah, but other than that, still check it out. Pretty iconic horror film. Pretty good movie for what it is. Not as good as a lot of other. Not as good as some. There are some better horror movies I've seen, like every now and then. But anyway, that's it for my review of The Exorcist, and here's how I'm going to rank it. I am going to give The Exorcist an 8 out of 10. Alright, that wraps up my review for The Exorcist, and that wraps up week 1 of Halloween horror movie reviews. So, what's going to be next? Well, next week is going to be for none other than... Where is it? Oh, yeah, here it is. Or on Sunday, anyways. Sunday morning, I believe. Yeah, next week, beginning Sunday or morning, or hopefully, Child's Play. One I have forgotten to talk about for a long time. So yeah, that will be next. I'll put him away later. But anyway, yeah. So we got through week 1, and I think only tomorrow begins October, but however, tomorrow I will actually, Venom Let There Be Carnage will be out, so I'll be reviewing Venom Let There Be Carnage. Because like I said, season's going to be a bit short due to all the movies that are now coming out this year. That were supposed to come out last year, but didn't. So yeah, but until then, that will be it for this review. Thank you all for watching. If you'd like to want to see more, then don't forget to like, subscribe to Movie Lover 120.